In all the years of sailing around the world, people have said to me, what's the hardest part about a circumnavigation? And the hardest part really is leaving the dock, throwing the lines ashore, turning your back on the dock and heading out toward the open ocean. Yeah, my name is Brian Hancock. I'm a professional sailor turned author. I made a living for 25 years racing sailboats around the world. A pretty good way to make a living considering it didn't feel like work and I got to see the world. But after 250,000 miles of offshore sailing, I'd circumnavigated a number of times. I got tired of being away. I wasn't quite sure how to make the transition from professional sailor to something else, but as often happens, sort of serendipity played a part in this. I was sailing my own boat, single-handed across the Atlantic, and a set of circumstances conspired that I ended up by hitting the reef off Bermuda, ripped the bottom of the boat out and really ripped my soul out, if you can be perfectly honest about it. An old friend of mine called me up and he said, look, I'm going up to Newfoundland for the summer, I've got a beautiful yacht, let's go for a sail. And I joined him for the trip to Newfoundland, and on the way I decided to write a book. I'd done some amazing things in the 20 years of sailing, 3 circumnavigations, I'd climbed some high mountains, I'd hiked in Africa. I'd grown up from being a young kid that left with the dream to sail around the world to someone that had done something quite substantial in the field of offshore sailing. And I realized that the mishap off Bermuda was just something that happens along the way. It was a way to put my life in perspective, and I wrote a book about everything, published it, and the rest, as they say, is history. And essentially what I am is a storyteller. I realized that as much as I like sailing for a living, I'm the kind of person that realizes that I've had a charmed life. I've seen some amazing things, I've done some amazing things, I've been some amazing places. And I really like the idea of being able to articulate it and share those experiences with other people that haven't been so lucky as I have. My new book, Grabbing the World, has just come out. It's a memoir. It's called A Memoir of Inspiration, Perspiration and Betrayal. And it's a story about what happened. The central thread of the book is how these 2 guys started this around the world race and against all odds pulled it off. The twist and the tale at the end, but it's a memoir. It's a personal story. I've grown up in South Africa. My family life's in it, my personal thoughts are in it, and it's much, much more than just a sailing story. It's a memoir. And so Grabbing the World, a memoir of inspiration, perspiration, and betrayal. Those early days racing, sailing, and seeing the world ingrained a certain street sense in me, which I used over the next few decades to balance a life of adventure and the pesky problem of having to earn a living to support a family. It's a fine line that I negotiated perfectly for most of my adult life, at times banking a small fortune, while at other times living on rice and beans to survive. I discovered that this kind of financial uncertainty led an edge to my life which I enjoyed. I never planned on growing fat and happy in a mundane existence. But I've since discovered that wives and girlfriends usually prefer stability. They are attracted to the gypsy in me, but they really want the security that comes from a regular job and a steady paycheck. I understand this now more than ever, having learned the hard way. But back then when the world was full of promise and probability, I could not get enough of it. My backpack was always packed and ready to go at a moment's notice. It's a bit more complicated these days as my backpack is filled with laptops, zip drives, hard drives, and a slew of cables and wires to keep it all working. But the spirit and intention are still there. My freewheeling lifestyle was the envy of my friends. From the outside it looked to be an almost perfect existence, and I worked hard to make it appear that way. I was not only visiting far-flung parts of the planet, but I was rubbing shoulders with the rich and famous. Princess Diana, who was prettier in person than on paper, handed out the prizes at the 85-86 Whitbread race and was friendly and gracious, a pure English rose amongst a bunch of unwashed and scruffy sailors. She paid particular attention to our crew on drum, the British boat owned in part by the legendary rocker Simon Le Bon, lead singer of the 80s pop phenomenon band Duran Duran. Le Bon and the 2 managers of the band owned drum, and they sailed on board for the race around the world. Luckily for us, the princess was a fan and a personal friend of Simon, so we had a special entree to her attention. It was 4 years earlier when I was racing the 81-82 Whitbread on an American yacht Alaska Eagle that we had been invited to Washington, D.C. by the senior senator from Alaska. We were to meet Ronald Reagan, but circumstances conspired against us as John Hinckley had other plans for the president, and he was in hospital while we were wined and dined by Senator Stevens as a personal favor to the owner of Alaska Eagle, who was a major campaign contributor. We did meet fellow sailor Ted Kennedy, who thought that we were nuts to even think of racing a sailboat around the world. But that was back in the days when most still thought that the world was flat, at least around the edges. Perhaps my most impressionable celebrity encounter was in a small bar in St. Bart's in the West Indies. Jimmy Buffett was far from a household name he has since become, and Buffett was playing at the bar playing guitar for whoever was interested in listening. I'd never heard of him, but liked the songs and the tropical beat they offered. I think that what I liked most about his music was that it spoke directly to the free spirit in me. And years later, when hemmed in by a mortgage, small kids, and a minivan parked in the driveway, I could escape to the sound of steel drums and calypso, intertwined with clever lyrics, and as Buffett so eloquently put it, a Caribbean soul I could barely control. Money was never an issue with me. I could always find some, make some, or spend some without having to think too much about it. And I always figured that making money needed to be fun, as I knew that fortunes could be easily lost, and it would be a damn shame if the lost money had been earned the hard way. When I lost it all after my first marriage came apart, I thought long and hard about the value of the almighty greenback. 10 years after I'd met Erin in a bar in Marblehead, Massachusetts, I was right back where I'd started, broke and busted, but with a bank full of memories and experiences that no divorced lawyer or ex-wife could ever take away from me. Well, the book is called Grabbing the World, and the subtitle is a memoir of inspiration, perspiration, and betrayal. And really it is a personal memoir story, but it's for everybody that's had a dream, people that have thought of doing something big with their lives, something different, written down on a piece of paper and had a dream of doing something different. This is a story about my dream. I wrote it down on a piece of paper and against all odds managed to pull it off. So it's an inspirational book to really point out that anybody with a dream, a hope, a desire to do anything, sail around the world, write a book, run a marathon, whatever it is, you can do it. It's possible to do it. You just have to believe in yourself. And all the years of sailing around the world, people have said to me, what's the hardest part about a circumnavigation? And the hardest part really is leaving the dock, throwing the lines ashore, turning your back on the dock and heading out toward the open ocean. This book really is, in essence, it's about that. It's about having an idea, whatever it is, having a dream, having an aspiration, taking action, doing it, and finding out that in fact it's easy for your dreams to come true.